was talking with my eldest son about this Sunday, and he asked me what my sermon was going to be about. And I gave him a little bit about the readings and about what kind of point I was feeling called to make. And he said, no. What story are you going to tell that has absolutely nothing to do with all this? And I was about to explain there's an attention-getting device in public speaking, and that's designed to kind of enter you into it. And my stories always have something to do with what's going to happen afterward. But I just let it go at that. So no story today. In the spirit of the Catholic saint, John Bosco, who used magic tricks to teach theological points, I'll get your attention this way. Shuffle, 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 shuffle. Okay, just at any point say stop.
Stop.
Okay. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Do me a favor. Show that to them. Don't let me see it. Okay. And show the camera if you can. If you can see that. Okay. And hand it back to him. Don't let me see it. Okay, at any point say stop.
Stop.
There? Okay. Just that right there. Okay. Thank you very much. I was at summer camp as a youth chaplain, and there were a bunch of kids interested in card tricks of various kinds. And so at the talent show, the coffee house as they call it, I shared this trick. It's just something simple. It's not a big deal. But this is supposed to be a magic deck that finds your card all on its own. So, yeah, you can shuffle it or do whatever, but eventually, this happens. Now, these are all just made to look old, so it's like vintage. It's a special deck you can buy, and it makes it look, old. And then eventually you get, among everything, you get this. It turned blue. What was your card?
Diamonds.
That.
And yeah.
Yeah. Now it's blue. Wow. Okay, now I'm going to show you how the trick is done. Okay, so just put that card aside, and I'll just take the next one down. Queen of Hearts. That's a nice draw. Queen of Hearts. We take the Queen of Hearts, we put it in the middle, right? Same as before, no problem. And then we shuffle it, we do all sorts of things, and then the deck does its work. It turns it blue, right? Yeah. So just do this. So it's all red, and eventually we find something that's blue. Eventually we find something that's blue. This is dead time, and I'm on YouTube.
So you have a new profession.
Very, very. Yeah, I'm not getting on Fool This anytime soon. That was a trick. Just about everything I said was a lie. A little bit of misdirection, a little bit of this, that, and the other thing. A trick deck. I mean, it was magic, right? But it's a trick. The awe and the wonder and the curiosity, all that's real. But the function is, the substance of it is a trick. Jesus and the author of Ecclesiastes say in today's readings that there is a world out there that we're all involved in. And its pursuit, its urgency, its importance in our lives is ultimately empty. As the actor Lily Tomlin once said, even if you win the rat race, you're still a rat. So much of our lives is consumed, rightly, with the pursuit of comfort and safety and convenience. As the author of Ecclesiastes tells us, ultimately there's an emptiness there. And Jesus draws a contrast between a way of greed and a way of love, and asks us to go beyond the apparent trickery of this life to find something deeper. Naturally, we rightly pursue wealth, comfort, convenience, safety, and that's fine on the surface. But there's something ultimately empty about our pursuits. Sure, we draw this distinction between, the love of money, and the way we approach wealth and, the wealth itself. And we know that anything can become an idol when it interferes with our relationship with God. And so we have to be careful with how we treat it. But Luke's gospel kind of cuts deeper. There's unique material to Luke in the way that Luke phrases, say, the Beatitudes, and in this passage, which is unique to Luke, to focus on, well, maybe it is the way we treat it, but maybe there's something about wealth, about possessions, about the life, about the finding of safety in this world that is ultimately empty. And something about wealth, it's not in the way you treat it. There's something about possession itself that's wrong. The author of Ecclesiastes, when he says vanity of vanities, he's using a Hebrew word, hevel. You've encountered this word before. Abel, the first murder victim in Genesis 4, his name comes from hevel. You knew he was a goner because hevel means vapor, breath, like that. It's the hot air corrupt politicians spew. It's, the empty breath. There's, it's evanescence. We translate it metaphorically, vanity. That often refers to idols in the scriptures. Because Hebrew makes a distinction between different kinds of breath. There's neshama, that's the breath that was breathed into Adam. And there's ruah, that means spirit and wind and breath. And that's the stuff that moved upon the waters and that Ezekiel spoke to. That's that spiritual breath. But Ecclesiastes looks at the pursuit of possessions and the pursuit of wealth as vapor. Something that just gone. Ultimately empty, borderline idolatrous. Something that weighs us down, but is ultimately just nothing. It's vanity, and Ecclesiastes repeats, it's chasing after wind. Not only do you never ultimately get it, but it's chasing after ruah, the real breath, the real life. Jesus says you are more than your possessions. Life does not consist solely in possession. You're more than that. You're more than what you do. You're more than what you've managed to accumulate. You are the very image and breath of God. And so there's a contrast between this vaporous, empty life on the one hand, and this other, perhaps even more abundant life that Jesus offers. We all tend to fall into greed and accumulation sometimes. We're very much like this individual who shouts into the crowd. Jesus has been teaching about discipleship, about prayer, about lots of things. And you can tell that this guy is itching to ask his question. And he wants Jesus to intervene in a little family dispute. Tell my brother to share the inheritance with me. He's probably the younger brother, because according to inheritance law, the eldest brother gets a double portion. So the eldest son gets a double portion. So he's campaigning for his brother to be a little more generous to him. It's a selfish thing. And because Jesus hasn't been talking about wealth, he's been talking about other things, this guy's interjection is completely off topic. He's basically a heckler, looking to Jesus to arbitrate. After all, you did go to rabbis to have them serve as judge in the middle of a conflict. So Jesus immediately pins that on him. This is greedy. This isn't about getting me to resolve a family dispute. This is greed. And so he tells a parable of a man who gets an abundant windfall, an amazing harvest. And he says, I have nowhere to put this grain. So I'm going to tear down all of my barns, the smaller barns, and build larger barns to fit it all. At which point, he could have just built more of the smaller barns. That didn't occur to him. But those kinds of things are the things that don't occur to you when you're greedy, when you're pursuing that life. Jesus points out the emptiness of it, the crassness of it, the obliviousness of it, and shows that it's ultimately empty. There's a real urgency in life. And it isn't about accumulating stuff. That strikes us as so important and vital to who we are. but it's vapor and chasing after wind. Your very life is being demanded of you this night. And that has a, you could die at any time and you need to be prepared to meet your maker kind of side of things. But on the other hand, it's about the 6 inches right in front of your face, is how Pacino put it in any given Sunday. It's the urgency of life. Your very life is being expended right now. The breath of God, God's own very self, lives within you. And we waste it on so much empty stuff. Stuff that will disappear, we can't take with us. And so Jesus draws this distinction between the vaporous, empty life and perhaps a more full, eternal life as an alternative. Because it's bad enough when we replace these categories, this need to accumulate, to ourselves. But it's made worse when we put it on others. When the categories that so define us, we then dump and project onto other people. And the full richness toward God that Jesus asked for is a richness to our neighbors, to ourselves and one another. And we miss out on that grace when we enter the rat race and become rats to each other. The author of the letter to the Colossians says that in this renewal that Jesus Christ brings us, in the intervention of God into humanity, those categories disappear. We're not barbarian and Scythian anymore, circumcised and uncircumcised, slave and free, and we can add more things to that. Gay, straight, trans, cis, rich, poor, Christian, not Christian. When we give up those categories, we can feel the breath within us and recognize the image of God and God's own very breath in other people. And that life, a life lived out of love of true self, love of God, and love of neighbor, is nothing vaporous. It gets us beyond that old life and welcomes us into new and eternal life. During one of the rest periods at camp 2 weeks ago, and I'm still thrilled with it because I just picked my son up from camp. He had longer 2-week sessions, so I'm still in camp mode. During one of the rest periods, one of the kids saw me playing with cards and was like, hey, during the nap time, as it were, after the big backpacking trip, could I play with the cards? I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Go ahead. Here you go. And he comes up to me afterward, and he goes, there were 52 cards and an extra blue card. What's that for? I said, I'll show you. And I showed all this. Now you know how that's done. It's a trick. The wonder and the awe and the curiosity you feel, that's real. The entertainment is real. But as adults, we recognize that ultimately it's a trick. There's something incredible about it, and important about it, but we recognize that ultimately it's a trick. And Jesus kind of calls our attention to this distinction between a vaporous life, which is ultimately a trick, and a full life of the breath of God, which is anything but. Jesus calls us out of our greed, our need to accumulate, our need to be defined by the stuff we have and the things we do, and calls us into a new life defined by the thing we've always been, beloved. So shuffle off the categories and the stuff and share with other people not the categories and boxes you would keep them in, but the love that allows them to kick off the chains and the boxes they've been put in. Share this love, which is no trick.